tell you something, everybody under the sound of my voice. There comes a moment in life when you've done everything you could, tried everything you knew, and still nothing seems to move. You prayed, you fought, you cried, you worked, but the mountain didn't budge. And that's when the enemy starts whispering, maybe God forgot you. But I came to tell somebody tonight, God has not forgotten you. He's working behind the curtain, shifting things in your favor, and all he's asking from you is this: surrender the stress. Because stress is the weight you were never meant to carry. Stress is what happens when you try to play God in your own story. Peace, real peace, begins the moment you let go and let him lead. Some of you are fighting battles that were never yours to begin with. You're standing in storms he already commanded to be still. When you finally lay it down, that fear, that control, that anxiety, you make room for his power to move. So today, I'm not talking about giving up. I'm talking about giving it over. Because when you surrender the stress, you open the door for God to move in your favor in ways you couldn't even imagine. Surrender is not weakness. It's wisdom. Most people don't understand that. When they hear the word surrender, they think of defeat. They think of giving up. They imagine someone throwing their hands in the air, waving the white flag, saying, I can't do it anymore. But that's not what surrender means when it comes to your faith, your peace, and your walk with God. Surrender is not about losing. It's about winning in a way that looks different than the world expects. It's not about being powerless. It's about recognizing where real power comes from. You see, we spend so much of our lives trying to fix everything, control everyone, make sense of every situation. We want to decide how things should go, when they should happen, and who should be part of them. We say we trust God. Our actions often prove otherwise. We hold on tightly to people, to plans, to outcomes, thinking that if we can just manage it long enough, push it hard enough, or pray it loud enough, it will finally bend in our favor. But life has a way of teaching you that there are some things you simply can't fix, some doors you can't open, and some storms you can't stop. That's where surrender begins, when you finally realize that your strength has limits, but God's doesn't. It's when you look at the chaos around you and say, God, I don't know how you're going to handle this. I know you will. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Because wisdom knows when to step aside and let the Creator do what only the Creator can do. Difference between control and trust. Control says, if I don't make it happen, it won't happen. Trust says, if God wants it for me, nothing can stop it. Control exhausts you. It drains you. It keeps you up at night worrying about things that are way beyond your reach. Trust gives you rest. Trust gives you peace. Trust lets you breathe again. And the more you trust, the more you see how God works. Quietly, steadily, faithfully, even when you're not moving. Some of you have been carrying things you were never meant to carry. You've been stressing over outcomes you were never meant to control. You've been trying to fix situations that were never in your hands to begin with, and it's wearing you down. You feel heavy, tired, stretched thin. That's what happens when you try to be the one who holds everything together, because only God can hold it all together. Surrender means saying, God, this is too big for me, but it's not too big for you. The world tells you that you have to keep pushing, keep hustling, keep grinding, that if you let go, you'll fall behind. But in the kingdom of God, the opposite is true. When you let go, you rise. When you surrender, you soar, because surrender puts you in alignment with divine timing and divine will. It shifts the weight from your shoulders to His, frees you from the illusion that you're the one keeping your world spinning. You're not. He is. And He's been doing it long before you ever tried to. Think about it, even Jesus had to surrender. In the garden, He said, not my will, yours be done. That wasn't a moment of weakness. That was the greatest moment of strength in human history, because surrendering to God's will led to salvation for the world. It wasn't giving up, it was giving over. It was trusting that the pain had purpose, the struggle had meaning, and that the outcome was in God's hands. When you surrender, you're saying, God, trust your way more than my way. And sometimes his way will take you through storms, through delays, through disappointments, not to destroy you, to develop you. Because surrender doesn't mean everything will suddenly be easy. It means you stop fighting against what's meant to shape you. It means you start cooperating with the process. You start seeing every closed door, every no, every setback as a part of the greater plan. You can't walk in peace and hold on to control at the same time. One has to go. When you choose peace, when you surrender the stress, you start to see that things work out not because you forced them to, because you trusted the one who knows the way. Wisdom knows when to fight and when to rest. Wisdom knows when to act and when to be still. Wisdom knows that sometimes the best thing you can do is let go. Surrender doesn't mean you stop working. It doesn't mean you stop believing. It doesn't mean you sit around doing nothing. It means you do your part and trust God to do his. It means you stop trying to manipulate what's beyond you and start managing what's within you. Your faith, your attitude, your patience, your peace. There's a quiet strength that comes with surrender. It's the strength of knowing you don't have to figure it all out. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to see the full picture to believe that the artist is still painting. When you let go of your need to control, you make space for miracles to move. You give God room to surprise you, to bless you, to elevate you in ways you never imagined. The world will never understand that kind of strength. They'll call it weakness because they can't see the power in stillness. But you know better. You know that when you release your stress, your control, your fears, that's when you're most powerful, because that's when God steps in. And when God steps in, no opposition can stand, no plan can fail, and no storm can last forever. So if you're standing in a place of uncertainty, if you're tired of trying to hold it all together, if your hands are trembling from the weight of what you're carrying, it's time to surrender. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise, because you've learned that real peace, real strength, and real victory come not from doing more, but from trusting deeper. When you finally lay it all down, that's when God begins to lift you up. Stress blocks your blessings. It's one of the greatest thieves of peace, joy, and spiritual clarity. You can't receive what God is sending when your heart is filled with worry about what might go wrong. Stress is like noise in the soul. It drowns out the whisper of divine direction. It fills your mind with what ifs, how wills and whens, until you can't even see the blessings that are already forming around you. The truth is, God can be working in your favor right now, but if you're stressed, you'll miss it. You'll mistake preparation for punishment. You'll see waiting as rejection. You'll call what's growing slow dead, when it's really just taking root. Stress makes you focus on what you can't control instead of what you can believe. It blinds you to the fact that God never asked you to carry everything alone. Some people think if they worry enough, they're showing that they care. But worry doesn't prove you care. It proves you don't trust. Stress is the language of control, and peace is the language of surrender. The moment you choose stress, you step out of alignment with the rhythm of divine favor, because God moves in peace, not panic. He speaks through stillness, not struggle. So many of us are praying for blessings with clenched fists, trying to control the timing, the outcome, the people involved. Blessings don't grow in tense hands. Blessings bloom in open ones. When you're stressed, you're closed off. You're distracted. You're too busy thinking about what could go wrong to recognize what's already going right. You can't see God's hand when your mind is consumed by fear. You can't feel his presence when you're too focused on the problem. Stress is subtle. It doesn't always show up as panic. Sometimes it hides behind busyness. It hides behind the constant need to do more, be more, and fix more. You tell yourself, I'm just trying to make things work. But what you're really doing is trying to be in control, and control always comes with a cost. It costs you sleep, peace, patience, and joy. You stay up at night replaying conversations, calculating outcomes, and doubting your worth. You wake up tired, your spirit running on empty, wondering why you can't hear from God. But how can you hear him when the volume of your thoughts is so loud? Stress builds walls where God wants to build doors. It stops you from seeing possibilities because it convinces you that you're stuck. It makes you rush what should be rested in. It makes you fear what should be trusted. And if you're not careful, make you believe that God's silence means he's absent. But he's not absent. He's aligning. He's waiting for you to stop striving so he can start shifting. Sometimes the blessing doesn't show up until you stop stressing. Because stress keeps you focused on what's missing instead of what's moving. You have to understand something deep. Stress and faith cannot share the same space. When one enters, the other exits. Faith says, it's already handled. Stress says, what if it's not? Faith says, I know God's timing is perfect. Stress says, it's taking too long. Faith rests. Stress wrestles. Every time you choose stress, you block the flow of favor that was already making its way to you. You've probably experienced it before. You were waiting for something, maybe an opportunity, a breakthrough, a relationship, or a door to open, and the more you stressed about it, the heavier it felt. You prayed, but your prayers were filled with anxiety instead of trust. You said the right words, but your heart was still worried. One day, you finally got tired. You said, God, I can't carry this anymore. I'm giving it to you. And just like that, peace came. That's not coincidence. That's the power of surrender. When you let go of the stress, the blessing had room to move. Stress keeps you living in tomorrow while God wants to meet you in today. I challenge you to love enough and care enough. You can't enjoy the manna he gives you for this moment because you're too focused on whether you'll have enough for the next. Blessings are released when you learn to trust the present process. God doesn't bless panic, he blesses peace. When your heart is settled, your faith is stable, and your hands are open, favor finds you. Many people miss their blessings because they're trying to force them to look a certain way. They want it to happen their way in their time through their plan, but stress keeps you locked into expectation while faith frees you to embrace revelation. Stress says, this is how it has to happen. Faith says, however you want to do it, God, I'm ready. When you release your expectations, you give God permission to exceed them. And he always does. When stress fills your life, even small problems feel like mountains. But when peace rules your heart, big problems feel manageable. That's because stress magnifies the problem while faith magnifies God. Stress says, it's too much for me. Faith says, it's just right for him. Stress drains your energy trying to change what's already in divine control. Faith allows you to rest, knowing that what's meant for you cannot be taken, delayed, or denied. If you want to see blessings flow freely in your life, you've got to unclog the pipeline with peace. Every time you release worry, you make room for favor. Every time you choose faith over fear, heavens open a little wider. God can't pour blessings into a vessel that's already overflowing with anxiety. He needs space to move. And that space comes when you breathe, when you let go, when you say, God, I trust you with this. Stress doesn't change anything but your peace. It doesn't solve the problem. It only magnifies it. It doesn't bring you closer to your breakthrough. Just keeps you distracted from the lessons that prepare you for it. The next time you feel stress rising, stop and remember this truth. Stress blocks blessings, but surrender unlocks them. When you calm your spirit, heaven starts moving. When you rest in his timing, the miracle gets closer. When you stop worrying about the how, God shows you the wow. So breathe. Let go of the control. Trust that what's for you won't miss you. Believe that every delay has purpose, every closed door has protection, and every unanswered prayer has preparation behind it. God is not asking you to fix it. He's asking you to trust him through it. Because the moment you release the stress, you'll realize the blessing was already on the way. God can't fill hands that are already full. You see, we live in a world where people hold on so tightly to what they have, afraid that if they let go, they'll lose everything. But the truth is, sometimes the very thing you're holding on to is what's keeping you from receiving something better. You can't grasp the new when your hands are still clutching the old. You can't receive what's next when your grip is still tied to what was. Life with God is a constant exchange. He's always trying to pour something new into your life. He can't pour into a vessel that's already overflowing with yesterday. Many people pray for blessings. They never realize their hearts and hands are already too full to hold them, full of fear, full of control, full of resentment, full of memories that should have been released long ago. You say you want peace, but you're still holding on to the pain. You say you want direction, but you're still clinging to your own plan. You say you want growth, but you won't let go of the comfort that's keeping you small. How can God give you something new when your spirit refuses to make room? Sometimes the blessing isn't delayed. It's waiting for you to release what no longer belongs. God doesn't withhold things out of cruelty. He waits until your hands are empty enough to hold what He has prepared. Because if He gives it too soon, you'll drop it trying to carry both. That's what some of us have been doing, juggling old pain and new promise, trying to manage broken pieces and fresh beginnings at the same time. You can't move forward like that. You can't run the race of faith with your hands full of the past. When your hands are full, you live in constant tension. You're trying to hold on to things that are slipping through your fingers, and it exhausts you. You're afraid to let go because you've convinced yourself that what you have is all there will ever be. But that's a lie the enemy tells to keep you stuck. He wants you to believe that releasing something means losing something. But in God's economy, release always precedes increase. What you let go of in obedience, He replaces in abundance. What you surrender, He multiplies. You see, sometimes God has to take something out of your hands not to punish you, but to prepare you. You were never meant to hold everything. You were never meant to carry every burden, control every outcome, or keep every relationship. Some people were never meant to go with you into your next season. Some plans were only meant for a chapter, not the whole story. Some dreams were meant to teach you not to stay with you. But when you try to keep everything, you block the flow of what's meant to come next. Imagine a child holding a handful of pebbles, crying because they don't want to drop them. The father stands in front of them holding diamonds, saying, "If you just let go of those rocks, I'll give you something better." But the child can't see the value in the trade because they're too attached to what's familiar. That's what many of us do with God. We hold on to the little because we can't imagine the greater. We clutch what's temporary because we can't see the eternal. We keep holding what's breaking us because we're afraid to trust what's waiting for us. But God specializes in empty spaces. He does His best work in the places you've surrendered. When your hands are empty, you're finally in position to receive. That's why sometimes He allows things to fall away. He's not being cruel, He's being kind. He's freeing you. Every time you lose something you thought you couldn't live without, He's creating space for something you never imagined. And the more you learn to let go, more you'll realize that His replacements are always better than your attachments. Some of you have been praying for God to bless you. You're still holding on to bitterness. You can't receive joy while your heart is full of anger. Some of you want guidance. Your hands are full of your own plans. You can't be led when you've already decided where you want to go. Some of you want new relationships. You're still gripping the hurt from old ones. How can God send someone new into hands that are still holding the past? Letting go is not losing, it's clearing the path for better. There's a reason God tells us to cast our cares on Him. He's saying, "Give me what's in your hands so I can give you what's in mine." His hands are filled with peace, with strength, with healing, with provision. But as long as your hands are full of worry, fear, and doubt, there's no room for what He's offering. When you finally lay down what you've been carrying, you make room for divine exchange. You release your burden and receive His blessing. You give up your control and gain His covering. You lose your plan and find His purpose. Letting go is not easy. It requires faith. It requires trust. It requires the courage to believe that what's coming is better than what's gone. That's why some people stay stuck. They fear emptiness. They fear the silence between letting go and receiving. But that in-between place is where faith grows. That's where God builds character, strength, and vision. That's where He proves that He's not done, even when it looks like nothing's happening. When your hands are finally empty, your heart becomes open. You start to see that everything you let go of was never wasted. Every goodbye made room for a new hello. Every loss opened the door to a greater gain. Every empty moment became the setup for overflow. The emptiness you fear is actually the space God uses to bless. So if you've been holding on too tightly to the past, to pain, to people, to plans, maybe it's time to open your hands. Maybe it's time to say, God, I trust you enough to let go. Because until you do, He can't fill you. Until you release what's old, He can't release what's new. God can't fill hands that are already full, and He can't bless hearts that are still clinging to what He's trying to replace. The sooner you let go, the sooner you'll see that what He wanted to give you was far greater than what you were afraid to lose. Faith and control cannot live in the same heart. One will always drive the other out. You can't say you trust God and still insist on having everything your way. You can't pray for His will to be done while secretly plotting to make sure yours happens instead. Faith and control are like oil and water. They don't mix. Control is born out of fear, but faith is born out of trust. Control says, I need to make sure this works out. Faith says, even if I don't understand, I know it will work out. Control depends on your ability. Faith depends on God's sovereignty. Most of us struggle here because control feels safe. It gives us the illusion that we're protecting ourselves from pain, disappointment, or loss. We like to plan, to predict, to prepare for every possible outcome. But control is a heavy burden. It keeps you anxious, restless, and constantly fighting against life's flow. You live tense, waiting for things to fall apart because deep down you know you can't control everything. You can't control people. You can't control timing. You can't control outcomes. The more you try, the more frustrated you become because life refuses to fit into your hands when it was always meant to rest in His. Faith begins where control ends. Faith is what steps in when logic runs out. It's what carries you when the plan doesn't make sense, when the path isn't clear, when all you have left is belief. Faith doesn't demand explanations. It rests in the assurance that God knows what He's doing. That's why faith feels uncomfortable. It forces you to trust in what you cannot see. It demands surrender in a world that celebrates control. But you can't walk by faith if you're still trying to hold the pen and write your own story. Some of the greatest stress in life comes from trying to manage what only God can handle. You're worrying about the timing of a breakthrough that's already scheduled. You're trying to fix hearts that only the Creator can heal. You're fighting battles that were never assigned to you. And the reason you feel tired is because you're fighting in a space that was never yours to fight. Faith says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Control says, if I don't move, nothing will happen. But sometimes the most powerful move is standing still. You see, faith doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the right thing while trusting God with the rest. Control says, I need to understand before I obey. Faith says, I'll obey even when I don't understand. And that's what separates peace from panic. Control keeps you awake at night, replaying every scenario, while faith lets you sleep knowing the outcome is already written. Control keeps your fists clenched, faith opens your hands. Control says, it's on me. Faith says, it's in His hands. When you try to control everything, you limit what God can do in your life. Because God won't compete with your control. He won't force His way into a heart that's already decided to be its own God. That's why sometimes He allows things to fall apart, not to hurt you, but to free you. He'll let your plans crumble so you can finally see that your control was an illusion. He'll let the thing you were holding on to slip through your fingers just to show you that His plan was greater. It's not punishment, it's preparation. He's teaching you that faith will take you places control never could. Think about it. Every great moment in the stories of the faithful began with surrender. Abraham didn't know where he was going, but he trusted God and walked anyway. Moses didn't know how the sea would part, but he lifted his staff anyway. David didn't know how he would defeat Goliath, but he stepped forward anyway. None of them had control, but all of them had faith. And it was faith control that moved mountains, parted seas, and brought victory. Faith gives you freedom. Control gives you fear. When you live in faith, You stop needing to know every detail. You stop trying to predict every outcome. You stop fighting the unknown. You start to rest. You start to breathe. You start to see that what's meant for you will never require you to manipulate it to stay. You realize that the doors God opens don't need you to push them. The ones He closes don't need you to pry them open. There's peace in letting go of control because control is exhausting. It's like trying to row a boat against the current of God's will. You'll make some progress, but you'll wear yourself out in the process. Faith, on the other hand, is like raising your sail and letting His wind carry you where you're meant to go. It doesn't mean the water will always be calm. It means you'll always reach the right shore. So many people live trapped between faith and control. They want to trust God. They also want to make sure they have a backup plan in case He takes too long. But faith doesn't work that way. Faith requires total trust. You can't halfway believe and expect full blessings. You can't say, God, I trust you, and then panic the moment things don't go your way. Real faith is steady. It stands firm in the storm. It doesn't crumble when the timeline shifts. It doesn't fall apart when the outcome changes. It says, even if it doesn't happen how I thought, I still believe it's for my good. When you live by faith, you stop fighting with life. You start to see divine order in what once looked like chaos. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start saying, what is this teaching me? You stop forcing and you start flowing. You stop panicking and you start trusting. Because the truth is, the moment you give up control, God takes over. And when He takes over, everything starts to align in ways you couldn't have planned even if you tried. So let go of your need to control how things unfold. You're not losing power by doing that. You're gaining peace. You're making space for the miraculous. You're proving that your faith is stronger than your fear. Faith and control cannot live in the same heart because only one of them can sit on the throne. Control reigns, fear rules. But if faith reigns, peace flows. Choose faith. Let God show you that what you thought depended on your effort was already secured by His grace. Delays are not denials. That's a truth that every person of faith must hold close when life seems slow, when prayers go unanswered, when doors that looked open suddenly close without explanation. A delay is not God saying no. It's often God saying, not yet. It's Him protecting you, preparing you, positioning you for something that requires a little more time. Because we live in a world that glorifies speed. We struggle with divine timing. We want things now, blessings now, breakthroughs now, clarity now. When it doesn't come on our schedule, we start to doubt the promise as if God forgot. But He hasn't forgotten. He's just working behind the scenes, aligning the right people, the right place, and the right moment so that when it happens, it lasts. Waiting can feel like the hardest test of faith. When you see others moving ahead while you're stuck in the same place, it can make you question if you're doing something wrong. You look at someone else's success and think, why not me? Why not now? But what you don't see is that God's delays are tailored. He knows the pace your heart can handle. He knows what needs to develop in you before He can deliver what He promised to you. Sometimes He delays not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because if He gave it too soon, you might misuse it, mishandle it, or misunderstand it. Timing is not just about readiness of the blessing. It's about readiness of the receiver. Think of a seed planted in the soil. You don't see anything happening at first. The ground looks the same day after day, but beneath the surface, roots are forming, systems are growing, and the foundation for the plant's survival is being built. If you dug it up too soon because you were tired of waiting, you'd kill the very thing that was growing. That's what happens when we rush God's timing. We uproot what was meant to bloom. What looks like nothing happening is often the most important part of your growth. God delays not to discourage you, but to deepen you. Sometimes the delay is divine protection. You think you're ready for the next opportunity, but God sees what you can't. He knows the trap waiting on the other side of that quick was. He knows that what looks like a blessing right now might be a burden later. So He slows you down, not to frustrate you, but to save you. You cry out saying, God, why is this taking so long? And he whispers, because I love you too much to let you walk into something that will harm you. His delay is not denial. It's deliverance from what wasn't meant to be. There's also a sacred purpose in waiting. Waiting develops what winning cannot: patience, endurance, and trust. When everything comes easy, you never build the muscle of faith. But when it takes time, when you have to keep believing even when you can't see results, that's where your faith grows. Every delay stretches your spirit a little further, teaching you to rely on something deeper than sight. Because faith isn't proven in answered prayers. It's proven in delayed ones, when you can still say, I trust you, God. Even when nothing is happening, that's when heaven leans in and says, now you're ready. Delayed blessings often come with double favor. When God finally moves, he doesn't just give you what you asked for. He adds what you didn't even know you needed. You'll look back one day and realize that the time you thought you lost was actually time he was using to perfect what was coming. That's why you should never despise the waiting season. It's not wasted, it's working. Something is being formed in the silence. Something is being built in the background. And when the timing is right, it will unfold so effortlessly that you'll forget the years of struggle. You might feel stuck right now, like life has paused and you can't move forward. What if this delay is the very thing that's setting you up for acceleration later? God often takes longer because he's building something bigger. Quick things don't last. Rush things don't root. Anything of true value takes time. The delay is where he develops your character to match your calling. It's where he molds your heart to handle what's ahead. Because if you receive a blessing too early, it might crush you. But when you've been tested, stretched, and refined, you can carry it with grace. There's a reason the scripture says, be still and know. Stillness doesn't mean inactivity. It means trust. It means learning to wait without complaining, to rest without worrying, to believe without seeing. Waiting seasons are not empty. They're sacred. They're where God strengthens your foundation so that when the blessing arrives, you don't fall under its weight. Sometimes you think you're ready because your mind says so, but your spirit isn't there yet. God's delays are his mercy in disguise, giving you time to align with what he's preparing. Don't let delay make you doubt destiny. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. God's promises don't expire. They don't get weaker with time. If he said it, he will do it. May not be in your timing, but it will always be in his perfect timing. Every delay is attached to a greater purpose, sometimes to grow your faith, sometimes to prepare the way, and sometimes to test your trust. The waiting room of life is uncomfortable, but it's also the most powerful place to meet God. Because when everything is moving slow, you start to listen. When doors won't open, you start to pray deeper. When time stretches, you start to depend on him more than ever. And that's what he's after, not just the outcome, but the relationship built in the process. So if you're in a season where nothing seems to be moving, don't lose heart. Don't mistake silence for absence. Don't confuse slow for stopped. God is still working. His timing is never late. It's layered with purpose. What feels like a delay is really preparation for something greater. When the appointed time comes, everything will make sense. You'll see why it had to take so long. You'll realize the waiting wasn't punishment. It was protection, positioning, and preparation. Because in the kingdom of God, delay is never denial. It's simply the pause before the promise. Peace is proof that you've truly surrendered. It is the quiet assurance that no matter how chaotic life appears on the surface, everything is working according to a higher plan. Peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of God in the midst of them. It is the calm that comes when you stop struggling against what you cannot change and start trusting in what God is orchestrating. Many people chase peace as if it were something to be found outside themselves, but the truth is, real peace is cultivated on the inside when you release control and surrender fully to divine guidance. It is the unmistakable sign that your heart is aligned with God's will. You cannot manufacture this kind of peace through sheer effort. No matter how disciplined or spiritually active you try to be, you cannot negotiate it, earn it, or force it into existence. Peace comes when you finally say, God, I cannot fix this. I cannot make it happen. I cannot control the outcome. I cannot even predict the path. I surrender it all to you. That act of surrender, though it may feel like weakness at first, is actually one of the strongest demonstrations of faith you can offer. Because in letting go, you are making room for God to do what only He can do. You are acknowledging that His power is greater than your effort, His vision is clearer than your planning, and His timing is perfect even when it seems delayed. Peace is proof because it is a tangible marker of trust in action. When you are truly surrendered, the turmoil that once consumed you begins to lose its power over your mind and heart. You no longer react impulsively to every setback or disappointment. You begin to respond thoughtfully, grounded in the knowledge that God is handling what you cannot. In the presence of real peace, anxiety diminishes, fear loses its grip, and the incessant need to control diminishes. You can face storms with a calm that astonishes those around you because they can see that you are anchored in something far greater than circumstance. Many times people confuse surrender with passivity. They assume that surrender means doing nothing, waiting idly, or giving up. Peace proves that surrender is neither passive nor weak. It is an active state of trust, a dynamic posture of faith. Surrender requires effort, but it is effort channeled toward letting God lead rather than trying to lead everything yourself. It requires the discipline to step back from control, the courage to release fear, and the patience to wait for the outcomes that God has promised. Peace is the fruit of this discipline, the living evidence that surrender is not just a concept but a lifestyle. The journey to peace is rarely instantaneous. It is often preceded by struggle, testing, and resistance. Our natural instincts resist surrender because they are trained to control, to fix, and to protect. When things go wrong, first impulse is to act, to react, to try to solve the problem ourselves. Peace emerges when you resist that instinct and instead place your trust fully in God. It emerges slowly, like water filling a dry vessel. It starts as a quiet confidence, grows as you practice trust, and eventually becomes unshakable. This peace is unmistakable. It is a steadying force in your heart and mind that declares, without question, that God is in control. Peace also serves as a shield. When you are surrendered and at peace, you are less susceptible to fear, doubt, and anxiety. You can encounter challenges without being consumed by them. You can face setbacks without losing hope. You can stand firm in the midst of confusion and still know that God is moving in your favor. Peace protects your mind and heart, allowing you to maintain clarity and perspective even when the storm around you rages. It is a buffer against despair, a sanctuary in the midst of chaos, a constant reminder that you are not alone in your struggles. Furthermore, peace is infectious. When people encounter someone who has truly surrendered and carries peace in their heart, they are drawn to it. They notice that this person reacts differently to stress, disappointment, and opposition. They are intrigued by the calm confidence, the steady presence, the unshakable trust that radiates from within. Peace becomes a testimony, a visible proof that God is working on behalf of the one who has let go of the stress and embraced trust. In this way, your peace not only confirms your own surrender, but also inspires and encourages others to seek the same. Peace is also deeply personal. It cannot be transferred from one person to another or mimicked by external circumstances. It arises from a personal encounter with trust, commitment to relinquish control, and a willingness to wait on God. It is a reflection of the state of your heart and the depth of your faith. It proves that your surrender is real because it is lived out internally, even when externally life remains uncertain or challenging. True peace is not conditional on your surroundings or circumstances. It is rooted in the unchanging faithfulness of God. Ultimately, peace is proof that surrender has worked. It is the sign that you have stopped trying to carry what is not yours to carry. It is the evidence that you have shifted from fear to faith, from striving to resting, from controlling to trusting. Peace shows that you understand the truth. That life is not about forcing outcomes, but about aligning with the one who holds all outcomes in his hands. When peace resides in your heart, you no longer need to see the entire path to walk it. You no longer need to understand every detail, embrace it. You can move forward with confidence, knowing that surrender is not a loss but a gain, and that God's favor is already at work on your behalf. Peace is the unmistakable proof of a surrendered life. It is the evidence that your heart has been unburdened, your mind renewed, and your spirit anchored in divine wisdom. It is the quiet, unwavering assurance that you are aligned with God's will, and it confirms that what you have released into His hands is exactly where it belongs. Peace reigns. You can face anything with confidence because you know that surrender is not weakness. It is the pathway to victory. Every closed door protects you from what wasn't meant for you. At first, it may not feel like protection. In fact, it often feels like rejection. You knock on doors, you plead, you pray, you work, and when nothing opens, it stings. Your heart aches, your mind races with questions, and your soul begins to wonder if God has abandoned you. The truth is that every closed door is not a denial. It is a divine safeguard. It is God's way of shielding you from what would have harmed you, misled you, delayed you from reaching the greater blessings He has prepared. What looks like a setback is often a setup for something far better. Sometimes we look at a closed door and see only limitation. We focus on what we can't do, what we've lost, or what we didn't receive. Our perspective narrows, and we fail to see that God has a bigger picture that we cannot comprehend. Closed doors protect your destiny. They protect your integrity. They protect your peace. They prevent you from taking on what your spirit cannot handle, from engaging with situations that are not aligned with your purpose, from walking into environments that would corrupt your calling. Just because a door is closed doesn't mean it isn't meant to be. It means it wasn't meant for now, or it wasn't meant at all. Consider the times in your own life when a door closed unexpectedly. Maybe it was a job you wanted but didn't get. Maybe it was a relationship that ended before it began. Maybe it was a move you tried to make that fell through. At the moment, it felt devastating. You thought the opportunity was everything you needed. You thought the rejection was failure. But looking back, you can see that God's protection was at work. That closed door prevented you from settling for less than your purpose. It prevented you from stepping into situations that would have caused pain or distraction. And eventually, you realized that another door opened at the perfect time, a door that was far better than the one you had lost. Closed doors teach patience. They teach reliance on God's timing rather than our own. We are often impatient, trying to push through obstacles or force outcomes because we want results on our timetable. But a closed door reminds us that timing matters. It reminds us that the right opportunities come not from our striving, but from alignment with God's plan. When we respect the closure and wait for the opening, we position ourselves to walk through doors that are perfectly designed for us. Protection through closed doors also develops discernment. Every option is available. It is easy to make choices that seem good but are not best. Closed doors narrow the path, forcing us to focus on what truly matters. They create space for reflection and prayer, allowing us to hear the whisper of God's guidance more clearly. Through the closure, we learn to distinguish between what we want and what we need, between what feels urgent and what is necessary for our ultimate growth. The doors that remain shut are as instructive as the doors that open. They shape our understanding, our decisions, and our perspective on life. Many people resist closed doors because they interpret them as personal failure or divine neglect. They forget that God's protection is active even when it is invisible. Every closed door is a shield against premature blessing. It keeps you from settling for temporary satisfaction while waiting for eternal fulfillment. It prevents you from taking steps that could derail your journey. It preserves your energy, your focus, and your heart for the things that truly matter. What seems like a loss is actually a preservation of your future. Closed doors also build character. They test your faith, your patience, and your resilience. They teach you to trust even when circumstances are confusing or disappointing. They encourage you to seek God more deeply rather than trying to navigate life with human wisdom alone. Every closed door is an opportunity to practice faith, to surrender control and to cultivate hope that transcends the immediate moment. It is a moment to reaffirm that God's plan is bigger than your understanding, that His timing is perfect, and that His protection is constant. It is essential to understand that protection does not always feel protective in the moment. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it disappoints, sometimes it is confusing. But in hindsight, the wisdom becomes clear. You begin to see that the closed doors were keeping you from relationships that would have damaged your heart, from positions that would have compromised your integrity, from choices that would have hindered your purpose. They preserved your path so that when the right door opens, you can walk through with confidence, clarity, and readiness. Every closed door also encourages resilience. It forces you to keep moving, keep praying, and keep believing even when the path forward is unclear. It reminds you that God is not absent in the silence. He is working behind the scenes. Your faith is strengthened, your vision is sharpened, and your heart is refined through the experience of waiting. Closed doors are not walls. They are signposts guiding you toward the alignment, preparation, timing that your journey requires. Ultimately, the lesson is clear. Closed doors are not obstacles. They are instruments of divine protection. They shield you from harm, guide you toward what is best, and prepare you for blessings that surpass what you thought possible. They cultivate patience, discernment, and faith. They teach you to rely on God's wisdom rather than your own understanding. And they remind you that His timing is perfect, even when yours feels impatient. So when you encounter a closed door, do not despair. Do not fight to pry it open. Do not waste energy lamenting what is not meant for you. Instead, trust that God is protecting you. Believe that He knows what you cannot yet see. Rest in the assurance that every closure has a purpose and every delay has a design. When the right door opens, it will be worth every moment of waiting, every pang of disappointment, and every unanswered question along the way. Closed doors are not the end. They are the beginning of God's perfect plan for your life. Patience is more than just waiting. It is the art of enduring with hope, the discipline of trusting without seeing, and the strength to remain steady even when the outcome is uncertain. Many people think patience is passive, but it is actually one of the most active expressions of faith. It requires conscious effort, constant prayer, and an unwavering belief that God is working behind the scenes. When you practice true patience, you are not simply marking time, you are preparing yourself for the blessings and breakthroughs that God has in store. You are shaping your character, strengthening your spirit, and aligning your heart with divine timing. Often teaches us that patience is necessary when we want something deeply but cannot have it immediately. You may have prayed for opportunities, for healing, for provision, for clarity, and yet it feels like nothing is happening. That's when patience becomes essential. It is easy to become discouraged, to question God's plan, and to wonder if He has forgotten about you. But patience is proof that your faith is not dependent on what you see, but on who God is. It is the understanding that God's timeline is not your timeline and that His delay is never denial. The practice of patience requires surrender. You cannot be impatient and surrendered at the same time. Impatience stems from a desire to control, to force results, to make things happen according to your own schedule. Patience, on the other hand, is rooted in trust. It says, I may not see it now, but I trust you, God, to bring it to pass at the right time. It is the calm that remains when the world is anxious, peace that persists when everything around you seems uncertain, and the faith that holds steady when circumstances are unpredictable. True patience also demands perspective. When we are in the middle of waiting, it is easy to focus solely on what is absent. We compare ourselves to others, measure our progress against theirs, and assume that if it hasn't happened for us yet, it never will. But patience invites us to look beyond the present moment and see the bigger picture. It encourages us to trust that every delay has a purpose, every setback is shaping us, and every waiting period is preparing us for something greater. Trials we endure in patience are not punishments. They are lessons training us to carry what God is about to give us with wisdom, grace, and maturity. Patience cultivates endurance. It strengthens your capacity to remain steadfast in the face of challenges. Life will always have seasons that test your resolve. It is patience that keeps you anchored. It allows you to face obstacles without despair, to maintain hope when circumstances are bleak, and to continue believing when the path forward is unclear. Each moment of waiting becomes an opportunity to exercise faith, to practice trust, and to grow spiritually. Patience is the bridge between desire and fulfillment, between prayer and provision, and between promise and manifestation. Moreover, patience teaches humility. It reminds you that you are not in control of everything and that God's wisdom far exceeds your own. When you rush, you risk missing lessons, opportunities, and blessings. But when you wait with patience, you allow God to work in ways you cannot predict or orchestrate. You begin to understand that His plan is perfect, even if it does not align with your expectations. Patience is a form of obedience. It is saying, I will not force the outcome. I will not dictate the process. I will trust you to handle it. Patience also nurtures gratitude. While waiting, you learn to appreciate the journey, not just the destination. You start to recognize the small blessings that were previously overlooked, the growth in character, the deepening of relationships, the strengthening of faith. These moments become valuable because they are part of the preparation for greater things. Patience teaches that fulfillment is not just about what you receive, but about who you become while you wait. Every lesson learned during the waiting period contributes to the fullness of the blessing when it arrives. Many people struggle with patience because they want immediate results. They pray for a breakthrough and then grow frustrated when it doesn't happen instantly. Divine timing operates differently than human expectations. God's delays are never arbitrary, they are intentional. He uses waiting seasons to perfect what is coming, to protect you from what is premature, to develop the resilience necessary to steward the blessings you will receive. Patience is the vehicle through which God's timing and His will are honored. Patience also enhances faith. The longer you wait and trust, the deeper your faith becomes. You learn to rely not on what you see, but on the character and promises of God. You discover that His faithfulness is consistent, that His provision is abundant, that His timing is impeccable. Waiting with patience allows you to internalize these truths, making your trust unshakable. By the time the promise manifests, your faith is strong enough to receive it with gratitude, humility, and wisdom. Ultimately, patience is more than just a virtue. It is a spiritual strategy. It is the path to peace, the foundation of faith, and the preparation for God's best. It teaches you endurance, cultivates humility, nurtures gratitude, strengthens trust. It equips you to navigate life's challenges without fear and to embrace God's timing with confidence. The next time you find yourself in a waiting period, remember that patience is not passive. It is active, powerful, and purposeful. It is the mark of a heart aligned with God, a spirit strengthened by faith, and a life positioned to receive the fullness of His blessings. Patience proves that waiting is not wasted and that surrendering to God's timing is the surest path to His favor.